6 of the remaining 12 Democratic presidential candidates still standing faced off at last night's debate in Des Moines, Iowa. It was the last debate before voters choose their top candidate at the Iowa caucuses on February 3rd.
Candidates discussed a wide range of issues, including foreign policy, gender politics, and health care. Let's take a look at some of the key moments.
Joe and I listened to what Dick Cheney and George Bush and Rumsfeld had to say. I thought they were lying. I didn't believe them for a moment. I took to the floor. I did everything I could to prevent that war. Joe saw it differently.
We just found out today that 4 Republicans are joining Democrats to go to him and say you must have an authorization of military force if you're going to go to war with Iran.
What we are hearing is 20 years of mistakes by the American government in the Middle East.
The 2 great foreign policy disasters of our lifetimes were the war in Vietnam and the war in Iraq. Both of those wars were based on lies.
I think he's flat out lied about saying the reason he made the strike was because our embassies were about to be bombed.
If our troops can summon the courage to go overseas into harm's way, often on deployment after deployment, then we've got to make sure that Congress has the courage to take tough up or down votes on whether they ought to be there.
Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States?
Look at the men on this stage. Collectively, they have lost 10 elections. The only people on this stage who have won every single election that they've been in are the women, Amy and me.
Just to set the record straight, I defeated an incumbent Republican running for Congress.
When?
1990. That's how I won, beat a Republican congressman. Number 2, of course, I don't think
the Affordable Care Act right now is 10 points more popular than the President of the United States.
health care is a human right. Every other major country on earth is guaranteeing health care for all. The time is long overdue for us to do the same.
You know, I was a single parent, too. When my wife and daughter were killed, my 2 boys I had to raise, I was a senator, a young senator. I just hadn't been sworn in yet. And I was making $42,000 a year. I could not afford, but for my family, child care.
If our Republican colleagues won't allow those witnesses, they may as well give the president a crown and a scepter.
For more on this, let us bring in CBS News political contributors Antjuan Seawright and Leslie Sanchez. Antjuan is a Democratic strategist, and Leslie is a Republican strategist. Thanks for joining us again, guys. We coordinate, which is remarkable because they were here super late last night. Yeah. They, you guys left shortly before I came in.
We waited for you.
We paved the highway for you.
Thank you. So, Antjuan, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah.
The idea of having fewer people on the debate stage hopefully meant that viewers and voters got an opportunity to hear more about the policies and maybe fine-tune who they like and who they don't like. Do you think that happened?
I don't think the game changed per se, but I do think some candidates were allowed to put some points on the scoreboard. I think Vice President Biden solidified his front-runner status and was able to speak to his experience when it comes to dealing with the commander-in-chief part of the presidency job. I think Elizabeth Warren had a chance to put some separation between she and Bernie Sanders on the political highway. I think they both were occupying that progressive lane in comparison to the moderate lane. I think she was able to differentiate herself. I also think Bernie did himself a huge favor with the $1.7 million haul that his campaign brought in within the first phase of the debate. So I think for the most part, everyone on the stage did themselves a service. However, I'm not sure we change any hearts and minds of voters in Iowa or particularly in states beyond Iowa because it was not the kind of debate that would allow that to happen.
Well, you know, right before Vlad and I were talking, and we were saying that the morning after, people aren't actually talking that very much about Biden. And the conversation about Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders has to do with this sort of spat about what he said and what he didn't say in 2018.
But that's all in the bubble chatter. If you visit someone in downstate Iowa, they're worried about how to feed their family. If you visit with someone in the heartland of Iowa. They're a senior citizen. They're trying to figure out how to pay for their prescription drug prices. So some of the things that are discussions in the chatter are not things that are on the minds of voters.
Right.
And I think that's where sometimes the disconnect happens. And that's why I say often, like, candidates have to be able to pivot away from the bubble conversations and keep speaking to the hearts and minds of voters.
He raises a really important point if you're talking about issues that matter. So the fossil fuels, they're talking about elimination of all fossil fuels. We're in Iowa, that is not an area, and certainly as you move farther north in the country, there's not an area that's going to be receptive to this blanket ban of fossil fuels. You're talking about prescription drugs, which is an issue Republican, Democrat agree on, lowering those prices. But the other part of that conversation was Medicare for all, or Medicare for who choose, or whatever, which really talks about removing employer-based insurance. And people are very concerned about losing what they have for something that may be more expensive and provide fewer services. And that's what the healthcare debate, that's how it rings true for many families.
But let me
I
ask
felt
you.
like they did the best with the healthcare debate.
It was very interesting.
It was most thorough and enlightening, I thought.
And Senator Sanders was pressed on how to pay for health care. What did you think of his response?
I did not think he did the best job of answering the question, especially when we've had this debate in previous debates around the cost issue. And that is part of the reason why in my opinion, Elizabeth Warren saw some slippage in the polls, because she had to define how she would pay for her health care plan. And so knowing that most of the party is in the spirit of being pragmatic, knowing that most of the party does not want to throw out the entire system to fix the system, I think Senator Sanders is going to have to do a better job of coming up with a cleaner answer on how he's going to pay for it and what it will mean for everyday people who do not want to get rid of their private insurance.
Leslie, here's the I think for Democrats, though, what they've got to be thinking about. President Trump has enormous support. Senator Cory Booker told me yesterday that the Republican Party is effectively the party of Donald Trump. He's got support not just across the Senate, not just across the Congress, but across the country for people who are Republicans. Did you see anybody yesterday who has that level of support across the Democratic Party? Did you see a juggernaut breaking out away from the pack? And to the point of Vice President Biden, to me, you need somebody who's going to counter that if you're a Democrat. That's what you want to see. And is Vice President Biden the answer? Or is it a Bernie Sanders?
Well, the tough truth here is that Joe Biden is the establishment candidate, and for all intent and purposes, he should be moving toward that nomination. That's what I would, for whatever, that looks like where it's going to go. But can he galvanize? Is he another Hillary Clinton, who everybody's going to sit on their hands because they're upset it's not Bernie Sanders? If you want to compare energy, Bernie Sanders has that very engaged base that believes in his authenticity. They believe in Trump's authenticity. They believe he wants to kind of ratchet up, break up the system. Trump came in to break up the system. There's so many parallels philosophically, in terms of policy. The ideas are completely different. But that's what Trump came in to do, is go against the elites, to go against the way public and private institutions have been held. So in that comparison, no, Joe Biden can't match that, because this is not a debate on policy. It's a debate on leadership style. And that's what people are going to be choosing in November.
I oftentimes remind people this. We're not graded on the same scale as Republicans. So how they conduct their business and conduct themselves, we do not conduct themselves in the same manner. Therefore, I don't know if the comparison to Biden and Trump, particularly when it comes to energy, is a safe comparison. What I do know is that step one for us is bringing the corners of this party together to be united on one front, making sure that people can embrace the pragmatic centrists, and the progressives will be okay with that if our nominee is Vice President Biden. Step two for us is being able to campaign in places that Donald Trump was successful in 2016, where Democrats have been successful in previous elections. Number three is to be able to speak to independent thinkers in this country who will make up a large part of the electorate and decide not only who the president will be, but how that will impact down ballot races. And I think that's so important. And I think that's the one thing that Democrats have to keep in mind. It's not about winning the election. It's about winning the electoral college this time around.
Well, I'm glad, math is always a really important subject. Hey, hashtag love it. But I would say the interesting part of this calculation, whichever way you look at it, if you're looking at even the Gallup numbers in terms of some of the polling of progressives, of Democrats, kind of centrist Democrats, will they take a Joe Biden, for example? And you see about a third, right, that we're going to support. But at what cost is the centrist candidate going to have to give up some of these kind of traditional centrist ideas to move in a much more tilted left idea. The more you pull the ticket to the left, the better it does for Donald Trump. And winning back those 10 kind of battleground states, 2 of which he didn't win, but he came very close. I think, again, I go back to on that stage, interesting, I keep going back to Amy Klobuchar because she is that dark horse. She is the one who is the iron fist with the velvet glove. She can deliver the punch with such a degree of, let's use authenticity. She's very confident in how she does it, and she's not trying for the power. She owns the power. That is so unique about her, and that was probably the part that shined the most from that stage.
Yeah, when I was watching her last night, I was trying to figure out, whether that made her sort of rise above it all, because she was always very level, always very clear, or did that mean that she would sort of fall into the background, become part of the wallpaper?
Look, I think she had a hell of a night last night because she did, I think, what most people feel they have to do, and that's transition to a 50,000-foot message and speaking to a general election audience. Because on the hearts and minds of voters, beating Donald Trump is the number one issue. So if you get in these food fights on the debate stage, that does not move the needle in terms of expanding our footprint in the election. And so I think she did a great job. I think Biden and even Mayor Pete, in a unique way, did a great job of speaking to a broader audience because it's not just about the Democratic presidential process. And we know there are going to be some Republicans who may participate in this process who may not be down with the Trump plan.
What about quickly, Tom Steyer made it to the debate stage through sheer will and
great
money
tie.
And things. Great tie. Wow. Okay.
He did make an impact on talking about climate change, saying if he were president of the United States day one, he would declare it a national emergency.
He always talks about that, but he needs to remember these are public-private partnerships that he does. He makes it sound like he does it without. He went and took an approach outside the government to be successful in galvanizing people around this issue. So it isn't government that was doing all the solution, which I always find the hypocrisy is ripe when he's talking about that. But it's a very important conversation, and I think if anything, that was good about this debate to get into the climate change issues. More than in the past debates, and that it's Republican or Democrat, we all want to hear about it.
We're running out of time, but there was no immigration. There were,
there was no race. There was no
I think that's what you ultimately
people of color on the
people
stage.
are saying.
And Iowa was a state in transition ethnically and demographically, so that would have been a really important issue.
But I think Elizabeth Warren, in her closing, did probably the most powerful thing throughout the debate. She raised issues that Kamala Harris raised on the debate stage, and impact on women and people of color. And that, for me, what she positioned herself as one of the best persons to stand out on the debate stage, because she raised the issues that were not issues in the debate. And I think she did herself a service thinking about what the demographics look like for states going into Super Tuesday.
All right,
All right,
Leslie,
guys.
Antjuan, thank you so much,
Keep talking
guys.
forever. Thank you.
Good.